Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dimitri Johnson, and you're listening to MMALatestNews.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest and the MMA Debate. We're here. Obviously, UFC Vegas 11 is just a couple of days away now. It'll be tomorrow, I think, by the time this video is going up. I'm here with Reece. I'm going to be talking a little bit. It's one of those questions, isn't it? Is Tyron Woodley done in the UFC? Obviously, he's coming into this fight 2 losses in a row. The first time he's taken 2 L's in a row in his career. Reece, could this be the end for Tyron Woodley? Should he win or lose on Saturday night?
I think he's in very dangerous territory. As you said, it's a big age-old question at the minute as what's happened to Tyron Woodley. He hasn't won a round in the UFC since the fight against Darren Till back in 2018. So he's gone 50 straight minutes now, and he hasn't even really thrown a punch in those 50 minutes. So that's kind of what everyone's wondering. And, normally I'd be very excited about this fight with Colby. And I still am because Colby's involved and we all know what Colby brings. But if Tyron's going to perform like he has been performing, then I don't really want to see it, to be honest. But maybe this is a fight with, the bad blood that might bring it out in him. So we'll see. I hope he isn't finished because he's a fantastic fighter. But he needs to decide where his career is going.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Do you think the fact that, this feud with Colby Covington, there is a lot of bad blood there, and it's just a fight that, should have taken place in front of that Darren Till fight. It was just the injury to Colby Covington that stopped it from happening. Of course, Till came on a short notice. Now, I don't think you could probably argue that Woodley's not looked the same since those Wonderboy fights. He came up the beat Koscheck, the knockout against Robbie Lawler, then he came up against Wonderboy, took the draw in that first fight at 205. And then he's almost grinded up the results after that to defend his title, which no one can hold against him. Obviously, once you become champion, your only goal is to remain champion and keep those belts for as long as possible. But do you think the fact that maybe, he is 38 years old, back in 2018, obviously would have been 35, 36, do you think age is just catching up with him? Because he is someone who's known for his explosive power and his knockout power.
Maybe, but when you look at someone like Tyron Woodley, he's one of the most naturally gifted athletes in the UFC. He's quite easily up there in terms of body shape and, physically, he's still got it. But obviously, as you said, ever since he beat Robbie Lawler, those 2 fights against Wonderboy, despite the fact that he won the second one, obviously drew the first one, but they were taxing. And maybe that the criticism that's been given to him inside the cage and outside the cage as well by Dana White and a lot of people, maybe it's just starting to get on top of him. So I don't really know what's happened, but I think he needs to kind of, re-energize his career because he's very, very close, I think, to getting cut from UFC.
Yeah, you mentioned that. He's always had a friction with Dana White in terms of their relationship and their working relationship. Obviously, I think it was back at 205, they was almost going at each other. And of course, Dana White, we've seen what happened with Cyborg. Once the relationship turns sour with Dana White, he can get rid of you very quickly. And it is interesting, as you said, the mentality of Woodley seems to be someone who it's him versus the world sometimes. It depends. If you're on his side, you're in his good books, you're fine. But I think as soon as you turn that flip on him, he turns that flip on you, it changes something in his mentality. And I think this fight with Colby Covington is the perfect almost gauge to see where he's at in his career.
I hope so. I hope this is the fight to bring the best back out of Tyron Woodley because he definitely needs it. And, as you said, with such public criticism that Dana White's had for him. But look, at the end of the day, we've spoke about it before on this channel, and I think Kamaru Usman gets a lot of stick for this as well in his quote-unquote boring fight style that people like to say. But when you're champion and you've got to defend your belt, you do whatever you have to do to make sure you still walk home with that belt. So is it a fan-friendly style, what Woodley and Usman have got? No, probably not. But let's not forget the knockout punch of Josh Koscheck, the explosive win over Robbie Lawler, which won him the title. We know he has that in him. We know he has that one-punch power, even against Darren Till. Obviously, he didn't knock Darren Till out, but it was a hefty knockdown from Darren Till. Darren Till just ran straight into that right hand, and it was over from that point. But we know he's got it in him, and I think that's what's most frustrating. And I think it's a little bit like the Robbie Lawler situation at the moment. Robbie Lawler's in the same boat. We know Robbie Lawler's got it in him, but they just can't seem to find it. And hopefully this feud with Colby is the catalyst to turn that switch back on.
Yeah, I think that Robbie Lawler, we saw what Colby Covington did to Robbie Lawler last year, and that was supposed to be Tyron Woodley's fight. And of course, I think those two are the right comparisons. Obviously, their number in the rankings is very different at the moment, but I think that's what worries me. I think should we go into the fight on Saturday, I think we could see the same thing we saw with Colby against Lawler, and Colby just dominates him for 5 rounds. If he gets a finish against Woodley, I think that'd be night to his UFC career. But it'd be interesting to see what happens. I think, we know Bellator has a more family, almost orientated feeling, and I think, someone like Scott Coker could pick him up, wrap an arm around him, and say, right, you are the best welterweight in the world. You can go win another world title. You can do this and that. You can go and have your rap career and build yourself a brand that you've been building outside the UFC. Working with TMZ as well. And it'd be interesting to see him, go up against those Douglas Lemus, the MVPs, a rematch with Paul Daly, a few years before, or a few years after their first fight, which he won. So I think his time in the UFC may be coming to an end. But, I'm looking here, 2.44 strikes landed per minute for him on average during his career. So what's that, 30, 40 strikes, per fight? And, even more than that. But, he only got 28 away in terms of significant strikes against Gilbert Burns, and got 68 in 5 rounds against Kamaru Usman in a fight where Usman's got 282. So in comparison, it's not looking good for him in his recent 2 losses.
Yeah, like with those figures, the main problem is the output. The output just isn't there, and obviously, I'm not a fighter, you're not a fighter, but naturally, as a fighter, the mindset as you grow older, maybe you don't want to hurt people as much.
Yeah.
But Tyron Woodley needs to be sent to that dark place that it's called, the dark place where you want to hurt people, because that's when we see the best Tyron Woodley. And maybe a move to Bellator might be best for him. As you said, it is a very sort of family feel promotion. It's whereas UFC is strictly business. It is the A side of the MMA world. It's the place you go if you want to win a title. Whereas Bellator, I think Bellator might be the place to go if you want to make a bit more money, maybe. I think we were discussing that in a group chat a couple of days ago, but you do, some fighters make more. We can talk about Corey Anderson, who's saying that he weren't happy with his pay in the UFC, saying Paige Van Zandt, weren't happy. So maybe Tyron Woodley, although I don't think he needs the money because of his rap career, as he said, and everything he's got going on outside the cage, but maybe he does need an arm around him. Maybe Scott Coker is the perfect person maybe to guide him back. But this is a big weekend for Tyron Woodley, because those 2 fights he's lost, it's a shocking performance. I mean, out of those 2, I don't know which one was worse, whether it was the Gilbert Burns one or the Usman one. I think for me, it was probably the Gilbert Burns one, because Usman was it was kind of like a 50-50 fight, but Woodley was kind of being edged, I think, when it comes to the betting. Whereas, despite Gilbert Burns being on a hot streak, Woodley was still favoured. But so for me, that's why that one was the more shocking performance. But it's a career-defining fight, I think, for Tyron Woodley this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think I'm a fan of his, but obviously a lot of the fights that he's got into, he's almost come in as the bad guy, whether it's people who are saying he's not good enough, they don't want to see him fight. But I think this time, all the pressure's on him in terms of he's the good guy coming into this. Obviously, Colby Covington's coming in with his gimmick, and he's very much the villain in this. And it seems like everyone's always looking at Woodley going, destroy this guy for us, please. So I don't know how he deals with that pressure, whether that's something that almost eats away at him, or he can revel in that pressure, knowing that he's the one that, people don't want to see him losing this one. So whether that is a big factor in how he performs this weekend. And obviously, Dean Thomas's coach said, it's very, and you mentioned this earlier, it's very easy to want to hurt someone at 25, 26 when you're going to come up hunting for that title. But when you're 38 and you've been there and done that and had all the fights that Woodley's had, it can be hard to put yourself into that mindset. And we saw it with Rory McDonald, of course, in the Bellator Grand Prix last year or the year before. Come out and say, I don't know if I want to hurt people anymore. Yeah,
and I think we're seeing it with Robbie Lawler as well. And obviously you can link Robbie Lawler and Roy McDonald. Of course, we all know. Even if you're not an MMA fan, you know of that iconic standoff after a round between McDonald and Lawler. So, you can kind of link those two and say that that's why those maybe don't have the ambition anymore. But I mean, Ty Woodley has obviously been in loads of fights. He's been in loads of wars, you may say. But has there really been any fights you look back on and go, oh, he'd have to sit out for 6, 7, 8 months to recover from that? I don't think there is. So I don't know if there's an excuse there for Tyron Woodley. But with him being 38, 39, like maybe he's just past that point now where he is kind of maybe just doing this for money. If that's the case, it's the wrong sport. This is not the sport you want to be doing just for money because you can get seriously hurt from it. It's a really tough one because he's got to decide what he wants from the rest of his career. If he does want money, then maybe Bellator is the space to go. I know it's harsh to say, but if he wants to win the title back, then he's really got to put on a statement this weekend. And there's no better person to do it against than Colby Covington. And we can talk about, obviously, the fact that he's been training with Gamebred. That's an interesting one. I saw some people saying that maybe he's been working on his striking and getting that back, which would make sense with, Masvidal being such an excellent striker. Hopefully, we might see the best Tyron Woodley come back out on the weekend. So we'll see.
And definitely, and Jorge Masvidal was a former teammate of Colby Covington, and those two have had their back and forth, both being, of course, American top teams. So I'd imagine Masvidal's come in there and gone, right, this is his weaknesses, this is his strengths, this is what you need to work out for. But of course, you can plan, as much as you want going into the fight. Once he gets that hit or once he suffers that first takedown or that, Colby's very much someone who's going to get you up against the fence and work you from that sort of angle rather than, fully take you down. So once that happens, I'm sure that Colby Covington is going to come out there full blast. But I don't know. This one, it's either going to go the same way as Colby Lawler did, or it could be an Usman Covington fight where both of them stand in the middle and just, go at each other. And we've seen Colby, he can take it for 5 rounds, but he does weather. And we know how hard Woodley hits. I'd imagine he hits quite a lot harder, even now, than Usman did. So I'd imagine if it becomes a brawl, I'd imagine Woodley is a favourable opponent there.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see you're going to see one of 3 types of fights. As you said, you're going to see a stand and bang one, like we saw with Colby and Usman. You're going to see a repeat of Colby Lawler, where Colby just shatters him for 25 minutes, or you're going to see a sort of performance that you saw Colby put on against RDA. Or even Usman against Maia, a very grapple-heavy performance. And I do worry that if it is the third option, does Tyron Woodley have the will to get back up after being taken down? Because once Colby takes you down, we all know what his volume's like. And on the floor, you're going to get that in full swing. So does Tyron Woodley have the will to get back up after he's been taken down? Over the last 2 fights, you'd have to say no. But we all know he does have it in him because we've saw it before.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe that extra almost 10-20% of motivation he has for this fight because of the hatred between the two of them might be that extra bit just to make sure he gets up again. Because last time, I mean, there's been a lot of respect going into those last 2 fights. It's been amicable at best. There's been that friendly nature back and forth to build the fight. But, Usman and Burns, he doesn't really have any bad blood against. They're 2, competitors that are on the come up and at the peak of their game. I think Covington's at that point. And I think, it's interesting the fact, he was supposed to fight Leon Edwards back in March. And he was very reluctant to accept that fight being rebooked or, getting it moved. Obviously, Leon Edwards was unable to travel. But I think it's very telling when, you've got a 27, 28-year-old Leon Edwards who's coming into his prime looking at one of those to get a title shot. And Woodley almost batted that away and was like, I'll take Colby Covington instead.
Yeah, and it's been well documented. Like the whole welterweight landscape at the minute, the biggest loser of this is Leon Edwards because he's kind of been left in the lurch, especially with the potential booking of Gamebred versus Nate Diaz again. I think people, especially in the welterweight division, are now looking at the likes of Tyron Woodley and thinking it's an easy fight, and I don't think you can blame him. If as a fighter, obviously not all fighters do it, but a lot of fighters look at tape of their opponents. If you go back and watch the last 50 minutes of Tyron Woodley, it's an easy payday at the end of the day, and that's how we're going to look at it. Tyron and Colby have been meant to. It's been scheduled like a fair. Well, to be fair, it's never really been scheduled, but it's been talked about for a good 2 years, 3 years. So we're finally going to see it, and I'm excited to see it. But at the same time, part of me just thinks we're not going to see anything from Tyron, and it's just going to be 25 minutes of Colby taking Tyron down, and we might see like a late finish or something from Colby. But if Tyron lands that right hand, we do know Colby will go down because Tyron hits harder than Usman does.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just looking at it, obviously, only 2 of his last 7 bouts have, finished before the 25-minute mark. The Darren Till submission, of course, and Robbie Lawler. So if you're a betting man, you're going to say, right, this is going to be done round 1 in favour of Woodley. But if it goes into those latter rounds, you're expecting probably Colby to push the pace and really get the decision win and grind out that result. But, as we said there, if Woodley gets those shots off early in those 2-3 rounds, starts putting, as they call it, money in the bank, putting those savings in, if he catches him in that 5th round with that, if he's still got 10-20% left in him, that might just be enough for him to get the win. But furthermore, if he does get the win, it's hard really to book him in another fight. You can't put him up against Burns or Usman, who's fighting for the title in December. You'd have to probably give him Woodley. Obviously, Masvidal's going to probably be fighting Nate Diaz again. It's hard to match him up against anyone that, it's hard to see him pushing for another title with a win.
It is, and because of the way he's lost them, it's kind of hard to kind of sit there and go, yeah, he probably deserves a title shot with a win. I think that the loser of this fight, or even the winner, has to face Leon Edwards, because Leon Edwards, obviously the win streak that he's on has been well documented. Some people are arguing that it's not the best on paper in terms of names, but at the end of the day, and you're going on that high of a win streak in the UFC, you've got to be a good fighter, and Leon Edwards is a phenomenal fighter. And he's been left out through all this. So I think that this weekend has big bearings on the division. I think if Woodley wins, I don't think you can give him a title shot. I think if Woodley wins, maybe you do that Edwards fight. I think I'm of this opinion, and I think a lot of people are, that Edwards versus Masvidal should be the fight, because it just makes perfect sense. Because then everybody in that top 6 are facing off against each other, and that's the way it should be. We saw that kind of like in the lightweight division not too long ago. So it's a pivotal matchup, not only for Tyron Woodley, not only for Colby Covington, not only for Leon Edwards, but for the top 10 of that division, because there's a few guys waiting outside the top 5, top 6 that are looking up and wondering who their next opponent's going to be. Yeah,
definitely. I think, personally, especially with the relationship that Dana has with Woodley, and I don't know how much that goes into the matchmaking, but I still feel, win or lose for him, he gets Leon Edwards next, and we try and get that match to happen before the end of the year. I think if he loses, you're probably looking at maybe do give them Robbie Lawler as a rematch, because I know that was meant to happen last year. You can book that up. It's going to be a win for one of them on their record, maybe a retirement send-off for them both, but at least from the UFC perhaps. Maybe Wonderboy for that trilogy fight. I know the first one was a draw, the second one was, was less closer, but, Woodley still got the win for that one, retained his belt. That would be one I'd be open to, but I think if Colby wins, he has more chance of getting the title shot, just because that title fight against Usman was so much closer. It was 2-2 on scorecards going into that final round. And I think those two, there's something special there, where if you book a second one, it's going to have more eyes almost appealing towards that fight. And especially Burns. Colby Covington versus Burns would be equally as an exciting fight to watch. Dan Usman and Colby too as well. But I think, as you mentioned there, with the style of losses that Woodley faced against those two, it's hard to give him another shot at that.
Exactly. And this is why it's such a big fight for a pair of them. I think if Colby wins, I think the fight we all want to see is we do want to see the Usman fight, because I don't care what anyone says. If you predicted that Colby and Usman were going to stand and bang for 25 minutes, you're lying. Everyone expected it to be very wrestle heavy, and it turned out in recent memory to be one of the best fights I've saw in recent memory, because it was just incredible. It back and forth. Both men took shots. Both men give shots. And, obviously Colby didn't, agree with a stoppage, but Colby's never going to agree with a stoppage anyway. Kamaru Usman was superb on the night. And that's kind of, for me, where the welterweight division's at. I think you've got some fantastic fighters, but I think Kamaru Usman is just better. than everybody in every aspect. People talk about Masvidal and saying that they want to see the fight against Usman again with a full camp for Masvidal. I think, but then we saw with Usman that he can stand and he can bang, but can he do it against someone as accomplished in the boxing as Jorge Masvidal? I don't know. I still think that it's a bad matchup for Masvidal in terms because of how good Usman is with his grappling. I think that if they fight 10 times, I think Usman wins 7 out of 10. You might even get a draw in there, which I know is not what anyone wants to see. But this matchup this weekend is massive for the whole division, and as Dana White says, we've just got to see how this plays out.
Yeah, definitely. If I'm Leon Edwards, I'm getting ready to pick up the phone, albeit probably be 5, 6 in the morning on Sunday. He must be ready to put that phone call into Dana White, be like, I'm ready, November, December, get me in there with the winner of that fight. But on the landscape of the welterweight division, where does Tyron Woodley's legacy almost fit in? Obviously, some people have called him the consensus greatest of all time because of how MMA's progressed throughout the years. He's the most recent, other than obviously Kamaru Usman, he's the most recent champion that we've had. His knockout wins against the likes of Robbie Lawler, Kelvin Gastelum win, of course. He's someone who's probably in that top 3. I think Usman will overtake him eventually because I think he's probably going to be the title holder for the next year. He's going to get 3, 4, 5 title defenses on his record. But obviously GSP is number 1.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I don't think you can disagree with GSP being the best welterweight of all time and also the best UFC fighter of all time. I think. But that's another endless debate. But in terms of Tyron Woodley, those 2 losses, it's tarnished his legacy for me, and it's tarnished his legacy from a viewpoint of most people as well. After beating Robbie Lawler such an explosive way as well, no one really gave Tyron Woodley a chance in that fight, and he knocked him out, and it was incredible, and everyone was like, oh my God, we've got one hell of a fighter on our hands. And then he had the 2 fights against Wonderboy, which were a little bit bland, so to say. Not the most insightful to watch, really. And then he fought, obviously, Damian Maia, which was always going to be a fight that stylistically wasn't really going to gel because of the fact that they're both, obviously, Tyron's got that big right hand, but he can grapple if he needs to, and he did that against Damian. I think the one that people were most excited for was actually the Darren Till fight. I think that was the one that kind of caught the most hype for me. I don't know if it's because we're English and it kind of caught hype over here, but the Darren Till was kind of, the way Darren Till was knocking out people and putting on such a disciplined fight against Wonderboy himself. It was kind of very, very hyped in the community. But I think when he fought Darren Till and beat Darren Till, most people were saying that there's levels to this game. And then that was when people were saying that Tyron Woodley, as Joe Rogan says as well, might be the consensus greatest welterweight of all time. And at that point, I think he was well within the argument. I think he was. But the 2 fights that preceded that, I don't think you can put him even in the top 3 right now. I think it's hard to do that just purely based on his last 2 performances.
Yeah, definitely. I was just looking there at the differences between Usman and Tyron at the moment. Obviously, if Usman goes and beats Burns, which is no easy feat, he matches him already for title defenses at 3 apiece. So even then, you'd probably say he overtakes him. He's got 2 performance of the night bonuses, 1 fight of the night bonus that as Usman. Knockout of the night once for Woodley, performance of the night 3 times. So it is very close. Obviously, he's got the strike force behind him as well in terms of his career, but purely on UFC career basis, I think Usman overtakes him just about.
Yeah, maybe. Obviously Usman has only just become champion not too long ago, and he is. I think he's going to be the champion for some time. I think the toughest fight he has in that division is probably against Gilbert Burns, and I think we're going to see a fantastic fight against Gilbert Burns. It may be grapple heavy, but I think you're going to see a lot of good transitions. So I'm really excited to see that fight at the back end of the year. But yeah, I think Kamaru Usman has already taken over Tyron Woodley. I think he's in that second spot probably. Maybe Tyron comes in third. It's an endless debate of the best welterweights of all time because there's been so many good ones. But Kamaru is definitely on his way to becoming the greatest, and that's why I think he's been campaigning for a fight against GSP. You know, because GSP is considered the greatest and probably rightly so. So if you're Kamaru Usman, why would you not try and test yourself against the best? To then, if you win that, can you imagine if Usman beats GSP? Everyone's going to lose it. Can he do it? He absolutely can do it. We know how good Usman is, and if he did that, definitely the best.
Yeah, definitely. No, I was just thinking that maybe, Usman, would he get critiqued more because it's a GSP who's been out of the cage for so long? Or would it be, we look at his resume, black and white, he's beaten GSP, being the greatest of all time in his eyes? Because Usman does get a lot of criticism for being, quote unquote, boring fighter. I wonder if it'd be a positive thing. I think it would be in the majority of the community, but I think a lot of people would go, "Oh, you've just beat GSP in his prime. You wouldn't have beaten him 10 years ago. You wouldn't have beaten him 5 years ago when he was still welterweight champion." It's an interesting one. But looking at the GSP's age, he's 39, which is only a year older than Woodley. It would have been interesting to see them two fight, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's why it was such a shame when obviously GSP come back and obviously moved up to middleweight, which I didn't agree with, and he won a title and vacated, which is obviously health issues kind of forced him to do so. So it wasn't ideal, but he kind of left that division in limbo. But I don't see GSP coming back. I just think that he's got too many health issues outside of a cage. Obviously, he's still training. He's still in phenomenal shape. The guy even has hair now, so you can see what life is like outside of the UFC for him. I don't think he comes back. I think the only fight he'd just come back for is a Khabib fight. I don't think a Kamaru Usman fight will get him motivated enough. So yeah.
I don't think he needs to come back. His legacy is he is the number one fighter of all time. John Jones, and we mentioned this off air, and Anderson Silva's 2 and 3, but that's their problems outside the cage puts GSP further ahead in terms of his legacy. He's done all that, as far as we know, as a clean fighter, and he's beat the very best in that welterweight division, albeit he's not beat some of the newcomers. But obviously, you can't be fighting forever.
You can't, and I think the top 3 you mentioned there. For me, John Jones is the best, but with his issues outside of the cage and his, drug issues, so to say, you can't put him at number 1 for me. It's if you're talking the greatest UFC fighter, you've got to be in the cage, getting wins. And, look at GSP, defended the title 9 times. 2-weight world champion as well, come back after so long out to face the champion at 85 and dominated Michael Bisping. Absolutely dominated him. Tapped him out. Literally sent Michael Bisping to sleep and come back. And that was kind of when they were fighting. That was kind of the argument, wasn't it? It was he's been out for was it 4 years? He was out for. Yeah. Can he come back and do it, especially against someone as good as what Michael Bisping is? And he proves everyone wrong. So for me, yeah, I mean he's lost a few times. GSP and John Jones hasn't really lost, so to say. And Anderson Silva's up there as well, but with his drug issues.
And his recent record as well.
Yeah, and his recent record as well. But obviously, that just comes with, the end of his career, so you're naturally going to fall off. And maybe that comes into the whole argument of fighters shouldn't be fighting on as long as they need to. But GSP is definitely number 1 for me. Then I'll probably put John Jones as number 2, and then Anderson Silva as number 3. But that is another debate that anyone could talk about for 4, 5, 6 hours a day quite easily.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's gonna be one. I think you could probably write a whole dissertation on who the greatest UFC fighter of all time. You mentioned there 9 title defenses, fight of the night 4 times, knockout of the night, submission of the night once, performance of the night against Michael Bisping, second most wins in UFC title fights. The resume he has is absolutely first class. But we'll wrap it up there, and I'll just ask you: is this going to be the last time we see Tyron Woodley in a UFC octagon?
I'm going to not answer your question, and I'm just going to give you. It's down to Tyron Woodley. Now it's time to see how bad Tyron Woodley wants it. I mean, if you look at his last 2 fights, you'd have to say yes. It's probably the last time we see him. Because I haven't saw anything over the last 50 minutes where I've gone, yeah, he's going to be back to his best, or he's going to get back to his best. I haven't saw that. So without even analysing the fight, I say, yeah, it probably is the last time we see Tyron Woodley. I hope it isn't, because we all know what he can do. But I hope not.
I guess his only saving grace is that he hadn't been finished in those 50 minutes. But I don't know if that's better or worse. Whether you get a first round / knockout where you can go, oh, he just caught me but he just caught me lucky. He caught me on a bad.
Yeah, I think you'd prefer to be knocked out and get caught by a punch, because he lost every single round against Usman. He lost every single round against Burns, and as I said at the start, he hasn't won a round in UFC since September 2018. So he needs this. Colby doesn't need this, because the way Colby's character is, Colby still thinks he's champion. But we all know that's what Colby's like. And Colby's never going to lose that. But, Tyron needs this for his career, where Colby will always be, the sort of loudmouth character that he is. So he doesn't need it, but Tyron definitely needs it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll make this the last point, but I'm also thinking that maybe Colby, he is an arrogant guy. Maybe he's looked at those last two fights and gone, well, those two haven't knocked him out. Let me go out there and knock him out. And then his post-fights could be, you two bums who are fighting for the title couldn't knock out this old Finnish guy who's 38 years of old. Let me fight one of you two, and I'll finish you. Because that's, his post-fight ceremony. He wins if he gets a knockout, which, could potentially play in Woodley's hands.
It might do. And the thing about Colby, which is going to be interesting, is we all know Colby plays up to the fans. But of course, there's no fans. So how is that going to impact his performance?
Woodley's been there too, with no fans.
Exactly. So, and Woodley's been inside the Apex as well, so he knows the atmosphere. Colby, I imagine he has fought in no fans before in his early career, but such a big stage, I don't know how it's going to happen. I mean, you mentioned Colby potentially knocking him out. Tyron Woodley hasn't been finished in 2012, and that was against Nate Marquardt. So, and even that was like elbow. So I think it's incredibly hard to finish Tyron Woodley. Usman and Burns didn't really go out to finish Woodley, although Burns did catch Woodley early on and did hurt him. But Wonderboy landed a fair few good punches on Woodley as well. I personally just see Colby winning every single round, and just winning out a decision, but very, very dominating a sort of performance maybe we saw against Robbie Lawler. That's probably the way I'd lean towards.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a perfect place to end it there, guys. Make sure to put your thoughts in the comments below. Is Tyron Woodley unfortunately done in the UFC? Will he get the win this weekend at UFC Vegas 11? Could the winner potentially, should they fight Leon Edwards, or do they go for the title? Make sure to follow Reece on Twitter. His that will be just below his the camera on screen, of course. Make sure to go give them a follow. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10K. And of course, UFC Fight Island comes back in just next week now, UFC 253. We'll be doing all the coverage of that and plenty more. Cage Warriors, Bellator's back, of course. So if you want to stick around and know where the best place is to get the best MMA content, make sure to hit that subscribe button, press that notification bell so you don't miss a video. And we'll see you guys on the next one.